Today I want to show you the game in which one of the top grandmasters of the 90s, Alexei Shirov, sacrificed his queen twice, not only in the same game, but on the same square. His opponent is Italian champion Daniil Dvirny, and he starts the game with the move d4. Shirov answers with d5, c4, c6, and we have Slav defense, a weapon in Alexei Shirov repertoire. Knight f3, knight f6, e3, opening the squares for the light square bishop. Bishop goes to an active square on f5, and Dvirny plays knight to c3, developing his knight. Shirov responds with e6, and now the opening transposed to Slav defense. Very solid opening for black, where they have this triangle of pawns on the white squares. Knight h4, typical idea for white to exchange this nice bishop on f5. Bishop a4 is a very instructive move. Black cannot avoid exchanging the bishop for the knight, and they want to do it in the best possible scenario for them. So they play bishop e4, and now if white would have taken the bishop on e4 and d takes e4, it turns out that the knight on h4 doesn't have any moves and really becomes a very bad piece. So knight takes c4 is not a good continuation for white. They play f3, which is not the best also because now they weaken their pawn structure on the king side of the board. Now bishop goes to g6, queen b3, attacking the pawn on b7. Normally in these positions, black plays queen b6, offering the exchange of the queens, and the game goes to an even endgame. But Shirov came to play in this game, he didn't want to draw, and plays queen c7, protecting the pawn on b7 and not exchanging the queens. White plays bishop d2, preparing castling long, bishop e7, preparing castling short. Now knight takes the bishop on g6. Normally white in this position wait to black castle and then take on g6, because now after knight take g6, h take g6, there is an open file h, and it creates some chances for black if white castle short side. But white castle long side. Knight goes to d7, keeping the options open whether to castle long or short. Exchange of the pawns on d5, and Dvirny plays king b1 because it was under potential x-ray from the queen, and the knight didn't have any move. So now the knight is unpinned and can go to b5, which would be a very nice move, and Shirov prevents it with the move a6. Rook c1, putting the rook on the open file. Shirov moves the queen away to b8, and white starts attacking on the king side of the board with the move h4. All logical. And Shirov attacks on the queen side of the board with the move b5. Dvirny immediately counterattacks with the move a4. Shirov ignores that and just plays short castle. Now this pawn is under attack by 4 white pieces, but it's not a good idea to take that pawn because after, let's say, this moves, black have 2 open files and very dangerous, potential very dangerous attack on the white king. Therefore, Dvirny understands that and plays a very good move a5, blocking black attack on the queen side, or at least they thought they're blocking the attack. Rook goes to c8, bishop develops to d3, and queen goes to g3. Active move, attacking the pawn on g2. Normally, You wouldn't want to take this pawn on g2 because this opened file g for white to attack the black king, but as pawns g6 and g7 protect the king very well on the king side, g2 pawn is actually under attack. Rook goes to g1 to protect that pawn, and black plays a great move, rook c4. This shows positional understanding of the game by Shirov, who realizes that white have two bishops. One of them is really good, that's a light square bishop, and the other one looks pretty sad on square d2, surrounded by their own pieces on the dark squares, and therefore bishop on d3 actually is not worse than the rook. And also, if white takes the rook, which they can do, it's not a huge mistake, they can start immediately attacking on the king side of the board. Dvirny decided that if a grandmaster of Shirov's level is sacrificing a rook, probably not a good idea to take it. He only had 5 minutes, 6 minutes left on the clock, so he didn't want to go into those complications, and instead plays f4, which is a mistake because black wanted to sacrifice the rook anyway, and now they can sacrifice it even better, taking the pawn on d4, and after pawn takes d4, queen will take on d3, and black has a very, very good position. The Shirov didn't do this. He didn't do that because after a rook d4, there is a very good move, knight e2, forking the rook and the queen. So now the rook has to take on d3, attacking the queen, so queen takes d3. Turns out that the black queen doesn't really have many moves, it's under attack, so queen g4, and this position modern engines consider better for black, but Shirov, I guess, didn't want to play this position, he wanted to play more aggressive. So instead of taking the pawn on d4, he just moved another rook to an open c file, rook c8. Dvirny moved his queen to d1, and Shirov attacks the knight with the move b4. Knight goes to e2, attacking the queen on g3. Shirov moves the queen away to g4. Dvirny still doesn't take the rook on c4, and plays knight c1. Very logical move, offering exchange of the queens. He sees that Shirov has pressure on the king with the rooks, and if he exchanges the queens, the game would go to an endgame, which would be pretty equal, and he will possibly survive. And here comes an absolutely brilliant move by Alexei Shirov. He goes knight e4, sacrificing the queen on g4. As we can see, the queen is under attack. Dvirny didn't take the queen, but let's take a look what would happen if he did. If queen takes g4, the thing is, there is no checkmate right away. There is pretty much a long continuation here. Knight takes d2 check. King will, let's say, go to a2. Let's start with this move. Then it's easy. b3 check. And let's say if knight takes b3, a rook a4 checkmate. And if king goes to a1, still rook a4, knight a2, rook a2 checkmate, because the knight covers the square b1 for the king to escape. So that's an easy variation. But what if after knight takes d2, king goes to a1? Then the first move for black is b3, with the same idea of rook a4 checkmate. White in this position can go knight a2, rook a4, threatening the checkmate, bishop b1, and here, after pawn takes a2 and bishop takes a2, Black Shirov had to see ahead of time not an easy move to make knight c5, threatening the checkmate on b3. So that was the move that was winning the game. And let's say after queen d1, protecting the square b3, then still knight goes to b3 and black wins a queen. Take back the queen and now have an extra piece and easily win the game. So I'm not sure if white saw everything because they had only 1 minute remaining on the clock. And my assumption is that Dvirny didn't take the black queen on g4 simply because he decided if Shirov gives you the queen for free in one move, then he sees something that white don't see. And I'm pretty sure that this whole combination Shirov indeed saw. So Dvirny didn't take the queen and played bishop d2, attacking the queen. The queen moves away to f5 with all sorts of discovery checks on the way. So logical move, bishop d3, blocking this diagonal for the queen. Simple move, knight takes f6, I'm sorry, knight f6. And here white plays another very logical move that seems like it should be winning the game, g4. And it turns out that black doesn't have any moves for the queen. It's under attack and doesn't have any moves. And the pawn on g4 is protected by the rook and the queen. So what Shirov does, he takes the pawn on g4, sacrifices the knight. Rook takes g4, and here Shirov sacrifices the queen again for the second time in 4 moves, and on the same square g4. He takes the rook with the queen. Queen takes g4. Brilliant. With 16 seconds to go on the clock, Italian grandmaster playing white takes the queen. Shirov takes the bishop with the knight on d2. King goes to e1. And Shirov just takes the knight on c1. And white resigned. White resigned because after rook takes c1, rook takes c1, king a2, b3 is the checkmate, very cute checkmate with the pawn, because the bishop from e7 covers the escape square on a3. Absolutely brilliant game by Alexei Shirov. Thank you for watching.